Today we're going to talk about clauses. Clauses are a group of related words that contain a subject and a verb. Independent clauses. These can stand on their own as a complete thought and can form a complete sentence. The depressed dentist decided to stop flossing. I have a subject, the depressed dentist. I have a verb, decided. And then I have one of those phrases, to stop flossing. That is an infinitive verb phrase, one of those verbals. I could also have the depressed dentist decided to stop flossing and eat some caramel apples. In this sentence, I now have a compound verb. My dentist is deciding and he's also eating. However, notice that eat some caramel apples cannot stand on its own because there would be no subject. So this is not a compound sentence, just a compound verb. The important thing to know about independent clauses is how to connect them. One way they can be connected is with a semicolon. I don't want to get in trouble with my mom, semicolon. I'll let her know what happened right away. I have two independent clauses. They are closely related ideas, so I can connect them with that semicolon. I can also connect them with a comma and a coordinating conjunction. Remember those fanboys, and this will create a compound sentence. I don't want to get in trouble with my mom, comma, so I'll let her know what happened right away. Remember, I really want you to memorize these coordinating conjunctions, fanboys, because it's very important for your comma rules when it comes to connecting independent clauses. It's much easier to memorize those coordinating conjunctions, those fanboys, and then to just kind of know every other conjunction you see is a subordinating conjunction. So let's practice. Debbie is a detective and she leads an exciting life. You see that fanboy and. So in order to figure out your comma rule, you've got to decide, am I connecting two independent clauses or am I just looking at a compound subject or a compound verb? So I'm going to cover that and up and I'm going to look at both sides. Debbie is a detective. I've got a complete sentence here, a complete thought. I've got my subject, I've got my verb. That's good to go. Now let's look at the other side. She leads an exciting life. Again, I've got a subject, she, I've got a verb, leads, I've got a complete thought. So I am connecting two independent clauses, which means that I need a comma. Debbie is just a young girl, but she's clever enough to catch professional crooks. There's a fanboy again, that word but. So let's cover it up and look at both sides. Debbie is just a young girl. That's an independent clause. She's clever enough to catch professional crooks. That's also an independent clause. So since I've got two independent clauses on either side of this fanboy, I know I'm going to need a comma. I'm also trying to catch a crook so that my life is as exciting as Debbie's. Okay, we've got that word so, which is a fanboy. This is kind of a tricky sentence. So is actually not functioning as a fanboy here. Let's look at it though, and I think we'll already eliminate a comma. On that front side, I'm also trying to catch a crook, independent clause. But if you look at the other side, that my life is as exciting as Debbie's. It's almost a sentence, but it's not a complete thought. That word that my life is as exciting as Debbie's. If someone comes up to you and says that, you're kind of left hanging, like, and? So what are you saying? You're missing something there. Those words, so that, actually works as a subordinating conjunction. So in this case, we do not need a comma. And we really can know that for two reasons. One, if we work through seeing if we have an independent clause on both sides, we don't. That side on the right is dependent. And that's because of that subordinating conjunction, that. So that is actually a subordinating conjunction in this case. I hope to become just as famous and as well known as she is. Cover up that and. I hope to become just as famous. That one works. And on the other side, we have as well known as she is. That's not a complete thought, okay? So we're kind of left hanging. As well known as she is, what are we talking about? So we do not have a comma here. Now there are several types of dependent clauses. The first one is a noun clause. Noun clauses, as you probably guessed, are used as nouns. And they usually begin with question words like what or where or how. For example, I know what I will do today. What I will do today is a noun clause. We've got a subject, we've got a verb, and the whole thing is acting like a noun. It is the object of I know. Can you teach me how to play guitar? That clause, how to play the guitar, is acting as a noun. I don't know where he lives. Where he lives is a noun clause, again acting as a noun. Adjective clauses. These, you've probably guessed it, are used as adjectives, so that means they're going to describe a noun or a pronoun. They begin with words like who, whom, whose, which, or that. The car that I bought is in the driveway. That I bought is an adjective clause. It's modifying the car. The guy who lives next door is a pilot. Who lives next door, that whole clause is acting as an adjective to modify the guy. Now with adjective clauses, sometimes we do have to think about commas. It has to do with whether they are restrictive or not. Non-restrictive adjective clauses mean that they can be removed from the sentence without changing the meaning of the noun, and that needs a comma. So think of it as something extra, and that comma is showing I can take it out and I haven't changed the meaning of my noun. So for example, mean girls who tend to travel in packs are usually annoying to be around. That clause, who tend to travel in packs, I can take that out and I'm still talking about the same mean girls, okay? So I haven't restricted the noun. Let's look at the opposite situation. If it's restrictive, the adjective clause restricts the noun and is essential to the sentence, so it does not have commas. All people who have sensitive skin should avoid the beach. If I take out who have sensitive skin, I have changed my noun. All people should avoid the beach? That's not really what I was trying to say. I was just saying certain people, people who have sensitive skin, those are the ones who had to avoid the beach. So basically, if that adjective clause is limiting your noun in any way, you do not have commas. They are essential. If it's not limiting the noun, if it's kind of just extra information, then you need commas. Let's practice. If opposites attract, which many people believe, I predict that I will marry a pro wrestler. I have commas because which many people believe could be taken out of the sentence. It's really just extra information. It's not restricting what I'm talking about. I'm still talking about the same opposites in either scenario, whether I have that clause or not. The punctuation mark that I like the best is the comma. All right, that adjective clause is that I like the best. In this case, I can't just take that out. Then I would be saying the punctuation mark is the comma. And I don't mean that all punctuation marks are the comma. I'm restricting that noun. I'm saying punctuation marks that I like the best are the comma. Stephanie, who I would classify as a mean girl, tried to get me to pay her $10 a week in friendship fees. My adjective clause here is who I would classify as a mean girl. I've got commas around it because I can take it out and I'm still talking about Stephanie. I'm not restricting to a certain Stephanie. So in that case, I do need commas. Okay, another type of dependent clause are subordinate clauses. Those are the ones that are formed with the other kind of conjunctions. Remember, I want you to memorize those fanboys so that you can rule out and know that all your other conjunctions are subordinate conjunctions. Now here's your tricky comma rule. When the subordinate clause begins a sentence, it is set off with a comma. Because he was late, she was angry. When the subordinate clause comes after the independent clause, there's no comma. She was angry because he was late. So let's kind of analyze those sentences a little bit more. He was late would be an independent clause, but that subordinate conjunction because is making it an incomplete thought. So think of those subordinate conjunctions as strong enough to connect a sentence if they're in the middle. That second sentence, she was angry because he was late. Because can connect those two independent clauses, she was angry, he was late, with no comma. Subordinate conjunctions are stronger than those coordinating conjunctions, those fanboys. However, if I start out with that subordinate conjunction, because he was late, then we need a comma. I can connect them because that subordinate conjunction is at the beginning, but I've got to have this comma in between the independent clause. So subordinate clause comes before the independent clause, I need a comma. If it comes after the independent clause, I do not need a comma. Let's practice. I feel certain that store mannequins come to life when the store closes at night. My subordinate clause is when the store closes at night. It is coming after the independent clause, so I do not need a comma. They change out of their silk dresses so that they can play baseball in the mall. My subordinate clause is so that they can play baseball in the mall. It's coming after the independent clause, so I do not need a comma. Don't be confused by that so. Remember that a so on its own is a fanboy, but with a that, it's a subordinate conjunction. However, even if I do my fanboy test, if I cover up that so and I look at both sides, I should realize that on the right side of so, that they can play baseball in the mall is not a complete thought, so I would still not be putting a comma, even if I'm thinking of it as a fanboy. If the mannequins get bored playing baseball, they go roller skating through all the stores. My subordinate clause is if the mannequins get bored playing baseball. Now my subordinate clause is in front of my independent clause, and I need a comma. Since they always go back to their original positions in the morning, no one knows about this except for me. My subordinate clause is since they always go back to their original positions in the morning. So I do need a comma because it's coming in front of that independent clause. Notice that all of these sentences are completely reversible. As long as you can distinguish where that independent clause starts and where that subordinate clause is, you can flip them and you have the same meaning. The only thing that really changes is whether you need a comma or not.